we learn that he's been to the university and they couldn't figure out what the medication was, but they've narrowed it down to being from the Orient, um, which is actually, we were just having this conversation apropos of nothing to do with JoJo the other week. It's a very Victorian trope, this world of opium dens and Limehouse and mysterious poisons from the East in London. This is a trope in authors like Wilkie Collins and Dickens. And the one that might have been the most direct inspiration for the Ogre Street sequence, the Sherlock Holmes story, The Man with the Twisted Lip. So, JoJo really is very clever. He knows that Dio is from London. He's never been to the Orient, but there are a lot of people from the Orient, and I'm using that word like in quotation marks. I'm not using it like casually because I know it's an outdated word. It's meant to fit this setting of the 19th century. It's diegetic to the setting, and he cleverly deduces that he must have gotten it from his own old neighborhood. So he has the coachman take him there to the most dangerous alleyway in all of London, which is so bad that the coachman says, I don't want to go there. And Jojo says, okay, you go home. I'm just going to stay here, quite bravely. And now we are here in Ogre Street. And knowing, as we do, that everything in JoJo, just about, is a reference to something. Any guesses? It's a band that I know you like, and like as a Generation Xer, you grew up with.
Ogre Street.
Ogre Street. The street. Leave off the street part. Ogre.
I don't know.
Ogre Battle by Queen.
I was going to say that. Yeah, I get it. I I think it was called something else on the album. It was on A Night at the Opera or the one before. Anyway,
I think it's the one before. I can look it up and do like a little super title on the screen, but um yes, it is named after the Queen song. And he doesn't pick these things just by accident. It's always going to make sense whether it's something specific in the lyrics or just the general tone. But we've got this idea that we're going up against an almost supernatural battle. And in the lyrics, if I'm remembering correctly, there's some references to it being sort of like a one way, no way out situation. And in fact, we are in a dead end alley. It is scuzzy, it is nasty, there's a driving snowstorm, and Jonathan is startled by a stray cat, which is, do you remember what the stray cat is up to?
eating the puppy.
Eating a puppy, again with the dogs. It's a hard watch for dog lovers. So this is an incredibly upsetting idea in itself. It's violent, it's hideous. It's also an indication that this is a place where the world is turned upside down. Cats eat dogs, not dogs chase cats. And rich gentlemen are not in charge of street thugs. Street thugs are in charge of rich gentlemen. Here we are in this scuzzy alley, and instantly, poor JoJo is attacked by three weirdos. We've got tattoo guy, kind of Asian guy, question mark, and bowler hat guy who looks so much like a particular pop star. I've never heard anybody else mention it. Every time I see him, I'm like, oh, that is. Do you have any guesses?
No.
Roger Daltrey. He looks like Roger Daltrey. I'm not insane. I can't be the only one who sees this, and yet I seem to be the only one who sees this. So it's kind of a callback to Jonathan in the rugby game. He is outnumbered, but he stays really calm and just lets them come at him. Tattoo lunges at JoJo with a knife, and Jonathan just grabs the blade in his hand, showing that he's either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, possibly both. Tattoo says, okay, well, I'm going to cut your fingers off. And JoJo says, no, if you do that, I'm going to kick you real hard in the groin. And we get a big hero speech Um, I'm fighting for my family. I doubt very much that your resolve, again, that magic word, is equal to mine. So, what do you think about his resolve in this situation?
Well, if he's gonna get his fingers cut off, he must have a terrific amount of resolve or some form of superpower.
Yeah, he is. I mean, I personally I have not made a secret. I really love Jonathan. I am thinking, are you stupid in this moment? But at the same time, I'm like just filled with admiration that he does not care. He's going to get it done, whatever it takes. So he does, in fact, manage to defeat the two henchmen with a little like 1, 2, 1, 2. And then he turns to Bowler Hat Guy and says, okay, you need to give me directions to the Asian apothecary. And Bowler Hat Guy now does a super cool reveal that, in fact, his bowler hat is made up of razor blades in the brim. Love this moment so much. It's this is one of my. I think I giggled too hard. Now our dog is fussing. Sorry, puppy. Um, this is one of my favorite kinds of weapons in anime, which is it's an everyday object and it's also a weapon. This is actually really true to the ninja tradition. If you think of some of the most iconic ninja weapons, like nunchaku, they're actually meant to be a thing for threshing rice with. It's stuff that would be found around a farm that you'd have a plausible reason for carrying with you, much like, oh, it's just a hat. Don't worry about it. It's actually a bladed boomerang. Bowler Hat Guy is like, it's on, and he throws his hat, which cuts JoJo's arm to the bone, but JoJo doesn't flinch. He just stands there and waits for Bowler Hat Guy to rush him so that he can kick him in the head and send him flying. And in this moment, Bowler Hat Guy, while he is getting the ever loving
She's a chan.
kicked out of him, has his own interior monologue. Fingers, hands, legs, he don't care what he loses. It's as if his resolve runs deeper than pain or fear. I took the lad for an easy mark. Guess I've been right disabused of that notion. This guy has known JoJo for 7 minutes, and he realizes this. Dio has lived with JoJo as his brother for 7 years and hasn't figured this out yet. Is that interesting?
Um, well, it rattles the narrative along, it gives JoJo an ally, which is always interesting.
It is interesting. In fact, I would say that allies are what make JoJo as popular as it is. It's the relationship between the hero and his allies. While Bowler Hat is having this realization, Jonathan just stoically removes the hat blade from his arm. But he is now surrounded by what I would like to describe as urban villagers. All of these Ogre Street thugs are carrying scythes, axes, pitchforks, torches. Would people have these things in 1888 in central London?
Possibly.
Possibly? Maybe. I mean, to me they seem like agricultural implements. But I
Well,
think that yeah.
they did have. You could travel from the country into the city even in 1888.
But would you be hanging out in Ogre Street with the
That,
worst of the scum of what is the thing from Star Wars? The most wretched hive of scum and villainy. I think that they're there to evoke certain movie images that have gone before. Can you think of some classic movies with hordes of villagers with pitchforks and torches and things?
I don't know, Frankenstein.
Frankenstein. One thing the JoJo franchise is particularly noted for is the ease with which it switches genres, although it doesn't always do it quite as quickly as it's happening in season 1 here. So I think these villagers are here less as anything realistic to the time period and more as a signal by invoking these images of classic Hollywood horror that we're moving away from a period piece and into something a little darker. Anyway, let's go back to stately Joestar Manor, where the cowardly coachman that Jonathan sent home because he was afraid tells Dio that Jonathan has gone to Ogre Street, and Dio decides, oh, great, I don't need to use the mask because if JoJo's
Yeah,
gone
he's
to
gonna get.
Ogre Street by himself,
Yeah.
he's going to get killed. It looks like Dio is right, and JoJo's fate has been sealed. But Bowler Hat stops them. As you have clocked, he is in fact an ally. And he says, I won't let a single one of you lay a hand on this gentleman. It's interesting that he instantly identifies him as a gentleman. And Bowler Hat now amplifies to say, hey, I didn't understand how strong you actually are, but you are super strong. You could have killed me. You could have killed my friends. You chose not to. Why? And JoJo says, well, I'm here for my family. I assume you have a family. I don't want to hurt them by hurting you, which is really sweet. And I wish, honestly, sidebar, I wish more people in real life thought that way. Anyway, let's go back to Joestar Manor, where the doctor is taking George's pulse and remarks that JoJo's been gone 3 days, and he's turning into a fine young man. Here is some more exposition. I found this exposition a little bit clumsy. I will just chime in to say, like, there's a name for this trope in TV tropes, which is as you know. Like, as you know, your son's been gone for 3
She
days
told
now.
me about that. Yeah.
It feels a little bit like that to me. But that aside, we get a really interesting further development of this new arc for George when he says, yeah, he is turning out well. I can't help but wonder if I was too hard on the boy while he was growing up. Did you have any kind of reaction to that?
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
no duh.
again, similar to where I was, oh, where does this come from? Be interested to find out where that came from.
I actually get angry. I have like quite an emotional, like, gee, do you think you might have been a little too hard on him feeling? But maybe that's just me. And okay, so let's go back to London. We've spent enough time in the country. And interesting transition, we get another stray cat, and like the one that startled JoJo, it's another black cat, but it's not eating a puppy. And this one is crossing the path of our frenemy Dio. He has gone to London. I'm not totally sure why. He was thinking he was going to go up there and kill JoJo with the mask, but then he realized, oh, if he's at Ogre Street, I don't have to. Maybe he just wanted to get away from all of the stress of the scene of his crime.
Make sure he's dead.
Make sure he's dead. Actually, that makes the most sense of anything. You got to make sure JoJo's really dead. And we know he has contacts in Ogre Street, so he can check. But on the way to go check, he had a little detour to the liquor store, and now he's stumbling around drunk and wearing what I can only describe as an awesome coat that is blue with gold piping, and it has this weird feather collar thing that looks very angelic. And I, the English major, start thinking about Paradise Lost and Satan having been an angel. And he is drinking in his awesome coat straight out of the bottle, like the total class act that he is. Did you notice the name on this bottle?
I did, but I can't remember what it is.
It is brandy, and it is Cronenberg brandy, spelled exactly like David Cronenberg. Is this an accident? I really don't think so. Araki is on record as being a massive horror fan. And although we haven't really had a chance to see it yet, that kind of gooey, weird body horror that you might associate with Cronenberg movies is very much part of the JoJo experience. And one other thing that I noticed for the first time, it says on the label, age 12 years. It's the same age Dio was when he came to be adopted. And I don't know. Again, I may be overanalyzing, but I can't help but think that there's something about this idea that those 12 years were the formation of the character we're seeing now. Like everything that came after that, all the love, the privilege, the whatever you want, Dio, I'll do it for you from George, really don't matter because it was those 12 years that distilled Dio into who he is right now. But as Dio is drinking and wandering around, he's berating himself and saying, I'm a drunken fool, just like my father. And I actually find this kind of realistic. And once again, I find myself tricked into feeling bad for Dio. Did you have any of that?
Not really. No, I don't have the same feelings for him as you do, I don't think.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I do have really complicated feelings about him, but there's just something about this idea that he doesn't want to be like his father, and yet he keeps finding himself in the trap of repeating his father's patterns. For those of us who have got a really complicated relationship, shall we say, with our fathers, whose fathers were not the most upstanding citizens, which I am one, that fear of turning into that person, I think, is extremely relatable. But as he is drinking and monologuing about his hated father, Dio bumps into some ruffians, some typical Ogre Street denizens, kind of gutter trash dudes. One is tall and thin, the other is short and stout. Makes it very easy to tell them apart. And the short one starts mocking Dio for being young, essentially. He's like, "Ooh, aren't you out past your bedtime? You should be sucking on your mother's teat instead of that bottle," which already a little touchy because we know that Dio has big feelings about his mother being driven to an early grave. But he manages to control his temper and he kind of pretends nothing is happening. He's ignoring him. And then the tall ruffian says, "Look at the man when he's talking. Didn't your old man teach you right?" And now we've touched that Achilles heel of Dario. Dio loses his temper. And this is one of those moments that seems small, but you have to wonder, is this calamity the flow of calamity in action? Because you think of all of the things that taller guy could have said, like, "You're too drunk, go home," or like, I don't know, cast aspersions on his looks or his sexuality, but he picked, "Didn't your father teach you better?" Ouch. And so, of course, Dio does the only honorable thing and glasses the guy in the face with his bottle of brandy. The taller man gets a knife out to retaliate. And Dio, suddenly, he's totally in control of his temper, of the situation, of everything. He is, in fact, I would argue, having a great time. And he gets really sarcastic. He's like, "Ooh, I'm so scared." And then he gets something out of his coat with which to fight the man. It is, honey,
It's the mask.
the mask. It's time. He slaps the mask on the guy's face. He slashes the other guy with the dagger to get the blood on the mask and says, "Let's see what you can do." And sweetie, first time viewer, in this moment, what are you thinking it's going to do?
I thought they would, I thought it would turn him into something, as it did, some sort of vampire type affair.
Were you expecting a vampire?
Not a vampire, but some kind of thing.
Well, we get blinding lights, big sound effects, spikes activate, the guy collapses, it seems like he's dead. Dio is super disappointed, and he thinks that the mask is, to use his favorite word, useless. And he spits on the mask just like he spat on his father's grave. But as he turns away, sure enough, the guy stands up, the mask drops off, the guy has pointy teeth and a scary face, and his color palette has gone to black and white with magenta pupils. I am seeing some echoes of a few classic horror movies, specifically Lon Chaney and Phantom of the Opera, which may or may not have something to do with Phantom Blood. The musical Phantom of the Opera came out the same year as Phantom Blood. Interesting. But also the character design for the vampire in the 1922 movie Nosferatu. The mask victim now attacks Dio, and he tries to defend himself with his little dagger, cutting off the guy's hand, but the guy just keeps coming, and Dio says, "Does the pain mean nothing?" And then he breaks through a wall and sends Dio flying, and Dio goes, "Ooh, what incredible strength." Are you seeing any echoes?
Yeah, because it's a similar kind of thing. It reflects what JoJo was doing a few minutes earlier.
It's exactly the same. It's the mask guy is doing exactly what JoJo did, and Dio is reacting exactly the same way that Bowler Hat did, almost verbatim the same questions of like, how are you dealing with this pain? How are you this strong? And Dio looks like he's done for. And like another iconic Jofo that we will meet someday with any luck, Dio's like, you know what I should do? Jump in the river. That's the answer to life's problems. I think we can assume this is the Thames. He's crawling towards it to escape, but the dead guy is too fast. He sticks his fingers into Dio, right under his skin, and he is draining Dio's blood. As the blood is draining, the mask victim is looking healthier and younger. And now we know for sure this is a vampire. But as the TV trope would have it, our vampires are different. Why fingers? Were you surprised by this?
Well, not really. I don't watch as many vampire movies as you. I wasn't sure. Yeah, I wasn't surprised. I mean, it was different, definitely different. Definitely different. Different than the especially what's the point of having the spiky teeth?
This is the question. And in fact, well, I was doing a little bit of research for our conversation. And in the past, I've seen this too. A lot of people ask, well, why do they have fangs? If they use their fingers, why do they have fangs? Some answers that I've seen people pose are that like they can use their fangs, but it's easier to use their fingers. I think the fingers are so interesting. I have always wondered why fingers. I'd actually like to propose that once again we're seeing the influence of the Fist of the North Star, that IP that so famously influenced JoJo. We have a duel in which the Dio character, who's even blonde, Shin, has challenged our JoJo character, Kenshiro, to a duel. Kenshiro is losing pretty badly. And then, when the girl they've been fighting over, the Erina, if you will, refuses to give up on Kenshiro and go with Shin, Shin decides to persuade her by using a very unusual form of torture. He uses the South Dipper Lone Eagle Fist to penetrate his opponent's body with his fingers, causing hideous, hideous pain. Very persuasive and very familiar to JoJo fans. Nowhere in my JoJo, I don't even want to call it research, but just like content consumption, have I seen anybody point out, oh my God, it's like five-finger death punch kind of a thing. But I have to think that that's what's going on. One further thing that I think is really interesting about fingers versus fangs, it's way less sexual to me personally. Would you agree with that?
I can see where you're coming from. It's not something I thought about. I understand your point.
You don't have your mind in the gutter like I do, but there's something so intimate about biting into a person's neck. I mean, it really mimics the act of making out, but sticking your fingers in, Now I regret saying that. There's a real, like, that's what she said moment to be had here, but it's like a physical distance. It's not akin to kissing. And I wonder if there's some desire to distance yourself from homoeroticism of not having a man sucking on another man's neck in this, the year of our Lord, 1986. I
Yeah, I
don't
mean that's
know.
quite possible. Definitely. I can see what the sensitivities would be.
It is interesting, especially because, this is the AIDS era where people are really getting quite freaked out about both gay sex and blood as disease vectors. And I don't know. I'm going to think about it some more, as I so often do, and maybe we'll come back to it later. Um, anyway, all of this doesn't really matter to Dio. He's more concerned about the fact that he's actively dying. And he has finally discovered the secret of the mask he's always wanted to know, but this is it for him. And he says something that I think is a real classic villain thing to say. No, I had such plans. Do you think that's sort of part of being a villain to be like, oh no,
Yeah.
it was all coming together? And did you, as a first time viewer, have any thought in this moment? Maybe this is it. Maybe Dio dies.
For a second, but it wouldn't be a very. I know it goes. The series carries on, and so I was
That's
thinking it'll be.
that is true. I wasn't sure. I really thought this when they killed the dog, I was kind of like, okay, from here on out, anything can happen. So when I was watching it for the first time, I was like, maybe he dies. Maybe this mask guy is now the main bad guy of the show. I don't know what's happening. But in fact, luckily for Dio, we pan back to the sun rising over the Thames, and as it hits the vampire, he vaporizes and
As
leaves,
vampires do.
as vampires do. Actually, this is an interesting point. Leaves behind an empty suit of clothes. There are a lot of different ways for vampires to die in cinema. Now, you are not the vampire enthusiast that your wife is, um, but I'm sure you've seen some different ways that vamps can die. It can be kind of gooey, collapsing, Wicked Witch of the West sort of thing. There's the Buffy option, which is my personal favorite, where you turn into dust and just blow away. How do you feel about sort of vaporizing?
I think it's. Yeah. I mean, it's all the same, really, isn't it? I mean, they vanish.
Well,
Basically.
it's a lot less messy than, for example, like the Fright Night option, which is a much gooier way to die, or even Dracula. It's really not a no mess way to go. You have to cut off the head. It doesn't go away. It's very like visceral and gory. But let's always try to remember that this is a shonen anime slash manga. It is for young boys, so it makes sense that you don't want to get too graphic. Although, hold that thought because it may get more graphic. Um, interestingly, Dio does not know enough to know that this is how vampires die when the sun hits them. And that actually makes sense to me because Dracula hasn't been written yet. And if you are a nerd like me, you know that in Dracula, sunlight doesn't kill vampires. That idea that sunlight kills vampires doesn't come along until the movie Nosferatu in 1922. So, like, yeah, it makes sense. Dio is surprised. He is now all alone in a bright sunlit street with the mask and the dagger. It's a really striking tableau. They're lying on these white cobbles, but Dio is crouching in the one triangular patch of shadow in this whole bright sunlit scene. And we start getting those first notes of the roundabout music, which means we're winding up the show. And now we're back to stately Joestar Manor. It's night. There's a thunderstorm. You could say it was a dark and stormy night. Dio comes into that iconic black and white checkerboard floor with the long red carpet to remind us of the blood that's just been drained and the vampireness of it all. And the whole house is dark, and he wants to know Why? Why is it so dark in here? And then a light is struck. It is our hero, Jonathan, lighting a candelabra. And he says, "You're a poisoner. I've got the proof." And Dio narrows his eyes, and we get our to be continued arrow. So that is where we wrap the show for episode 2. We've done a lot of talking, and I can tell that you are tired. It is late at night for anyone watching. It's very
Sorry, I'm
late.
drooping here, but
Yeah, I know, it's not surprising. I shouldn't have given you such a good dinner, to be honest. Before we go, I want to just do our questions to ponder, sort of our book club questions. How are you feeling about grown-up Jonathan Joestar and Dio Brando? How have they changed by nurture, and how have they stayed the same in terms of nature?
well, I think that Dio has become a bit more cunning, and Jonathan seems to be a little bit less stupid.
I think that's
Otherwise, they're much
fair.
the same.
They are much the same. But I want to go back again to that point I made last time. Why is Jonathan less stupid? Who made him less stupid? I mean, it clearly wasn't his dad. Who's new since episode 1?
Dio's new. Yes, he's brought out the less stupidness in him.
He'd never had that kind of challenge before. He never had to stand up for himself. We touched on that in episode 1. And following on, this is still question 1. Why is Dio a bit more cunning? I think there's a parallel here that I'm trying to make, which is if Dio made Jonathan less stupid, is it possible that Jonathan taught Dio to be a bit more cunning as well?
I guess so. I guess that's possible.
Because, well, if you remember, the way that Dio's cunning is manifesting itself is he's controlling his temper and hiding his emotions. And he only realized he needed to do that because of the situation with Erina and Jonathan, if you'll remember. This is something that we've talked a little bit about through the episode, which is George's attitude has been changing noticeably across the episode, from Dio being the golden child to Jonathan coming back to center stage. We don't have any explicit information within the text about why this is happening. You've been saying, I'm not sure why this is happening. Shall I posit my theory?
Sure.
Unless you want to posit a theory.
No, you go ahead.
My theory is, you were saying it's to do with the poisoning. I think yes. Specifically, it's that sense of mortality. As he feels he's drawing close to the end of his own life, he's thinking about, what is my legacy? And as much as he thinks Dio is the greatest thing ever, there is still that genetic connection, bearing in mind it's phantom blood, not phantom adoption papers. Maybe this is the moment when blood is finally a little thicker than water, which, by the way, it's not a position that I feel great about. I don't like the notion that chosen family is somehow less than genetic family. And I don't think Iraqi would make that argument either. If you look especially at some of his later work, he seems to be sort of actively rejecting that notion. But within the Phantom Bloodoverse, there is a real sense that genetics and blood do count for something. Question 3. We have done a lot of comparing of Jonathan and Dio, and I've told you that Iraqi specifically designed them to be foils for each other. But there is another character that's emerged in episode 2 that I think is a really great comparison for Dio on this nature and nurture question that you actually already touched on. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think that though I was a bit disappointed that his story arc just came to an end so quickly because I think that the sudden transformation,
We're
um,
talking about bowler hat guy, right? Just to
no, the
clarify.
vampire.
What, mask guy?
Yeah, no, because that's a nature and nurture thing. Because it's like he's
Oh,
nurtured very suddenly into it.
into vampirism. Oh, that's really interesting. Yes, the mask has nurtured him into that. Yeah, that presents a really great question because it's not necessarily his nature to be a killer. He was being someone who teased Dio, but he wasn't attacking him physically with murderous intent. I hadn't even thought of that. That's amazing, babe. Yeah. I was thinking of someone else entirely, which I thought you were talking about, which is Bowler Hat Guy from Ogre Street. If you think about it, they're both guys who grew up in the same terrible neighborhood. They are both gutter trash. Bowler Hat Guy is the leader of a gang, and in episode one, we saw that Dio has his gang of slightly lower class kids around the Joestar mansion. They're both street fighters. They both start out underestimating Jonathan Joestar. Bowler Hat Guy even has a little aside where he's like, "This is your first fight, isn't it?" Um, and they're both blonde, for what it's worth. And yet, Bowler Hat Guy only has to have one fight with Jonathan to realize, oh, this is a true gentleman through and through. And Dio has lived with Jonathan for so long, but can't figure it out. And yet, going back to the vampire, Dio instantly recognizes the vampire's strength, just like Bowler Hat instantly recognizes Jonathan's strength. What is it that is making them able to identify the strengths in their opponents in the one case, but not the other? What I'm thinking about in my English teacher kind of way is the phrase game, recognize game. It's American slang. It means, for example, if I am a con man running a Ponzi scheme and you come to me and try to sell me a Ponzi scheme, I'm not going to fall for it because game, recognize game. Is it possible that Bowler Hat can see how JoJo operates? Because despite being kind of a street thug, Bowler Hat, we see, has a real sense of honor. You know, he's like, oh, I respect the fact that you didn't press your advantage. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you. Meanwhile, the vampire is just a monster and it fights like a monster. And Dio's like, aha, I understand you because he's a monster. Do you see what I'm getting at? Am I being too obtuse?
No, no, not at all. No,
Abstruse?
it makes sense.
I just I just think it's really fascinating. It's something that I notice again and again in these two episodes especially. Dio really thinks that he's so much smarter than JoJo, while at the same time he doesn't understand JoJo at all. Again and again, he miscalculates where JoJo's strengths and weaknesses are, even though they know each other as well, I would argue, as two human beings can know each other. They've grown up in the same house. We saw before that they did their lessons together. They went on to university together. They played as a team. They should know each other inside and out. And yet, for whatever reason, Dio cannot know JoJo. But it does seem like JoJo kind of knows Dio. He knew what button to press by mentioning his father, right? To get him upset. I don't know what that does to my theory, but I just think it's really interesting. All right, moving on. That was the nature versus nurture bit. On the issue of fate and free will, my other big theme, this looks like a really fate-heavy episode, with the big examples being Jonathan finding the letter at just the right time and Dio deciding to take the mask to London at just the wrong time. Is there a way that we can reframe this in a more free will way, or is it just pure fate?
So by the end of this episode, Dio is in a really bad place. His life is over.
Is it just bad luck, or was there something he could have chosen to do differently?
Yeah, I mean, he just could have decided not to go to London, I suppose.
Even bigger than that, he could have just
Not been, not poisoned. What's his face, George?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a real option.
Although this takes us back to the scorpion and frog question of whether nature is fate.
All right. Last question. And this is a really simple question. What do you think is going to happen next?
Oh, I've got no idea. It's a cliffhanger.
It is a cliffhanger. We've gone from a period drama to a supernatural drama. What happens next is anybody's guess. So we will have to wait and be continued.